Charles. Right, okay, I'll make a start. Right, so, good to see you all again. Got a couple of the students from the morning group who joined us for the session, so just a little bit of catching up. Right, so today, going to carry on with it's really, as I say, your own projects, whatever you fancy working on, or if you want to work from kind of old photographs, that's quite a nice theme. That's really the theme for this month. Last week I demonstrated in charcoal and I did a little landscape demonstration, and this week I'm going to do another bit of work in charcoal again, but this time work with portrait. So that was what I did this morning, one of the students' own photos. So I was thinking I could use either this one, or if anybody else has got anything they'd prefer me to use. No, I use this one then. So just kind of really go through the way I work portraits. Okay. So yeah, so we charcoal, and I'm going to stick with charcoal. So next week I will stick with tonal mediums, but I'm going to use some watercolour. So like maybe just sketch out and then watercolour, or maybe a bit of ink. Also, the pictures I brought in this week these are some of the ones I did in Ireland. I thought I'd just show you a few of the things I did over the summer. These ones are in Ireland, and this is the start of the painting I started yesterday, which is a commission painting. So this is I may start it again. I'm not quite sure if I've got everything quite in yet. And that's when I started. So that's oils, and that's just how I start my oils off. Just thought I'd show you that. Because I thought I'd show you now, and then you can see it week by week as it progresses. So yeah, with portraits, I like to just get a bit of an idea where I'm going to work to start with. So I just kind of get a rough head shape in. So I'm thinking is roughly that sort of shape. Just to make sure I've got enough room on the paper. So that's just, holding the pencil, the charcoal at the tip, and then just kind of drawing from my shoulder, drawing at arm's length. So he's going to go in about there. And once I'm there, I like to try and see, just try and draw almost like an imaginary line through the middle of the features. Okay, so in this case, I'm seeing a lot more of this side of his face than I am that side of his face. So that's going to be over here somewhere, about there. And it's also at a very slight angle. So I'm really looking at, say, maybe where his lip, in the middle of his lips, in the middle of his brow there, and just a line that would go through that. Not going to worry about his nose jutting out, just that bit there. So that'll be that. I'm also going to be looking for his eye level. So again, that's a little bit of an angle. And you should find that, say, from the chin to the top of the head, that should be around about halfway. So again, I can just measure that with my charcoal, and that's pretty much halfway. It will depend, if you're working from a photo, it would depend who's taking the photo and if they're low down or high up, things like that. Or if his head was tilted back, it wouldn't be. But generally speaking, you're looking at halfway. So that's what I do to just kind of almost like plan it out. It's worth having some guidelines that you can then draw into. From there, I like to draw in the feature. So that's where I kind of come right down to the end of my charcoal and try and draw particular shapes. This side of his face is in shadow, so actually, in some ways, it might be easier if I just get a little bit of shadow in first and just blend that in a little bit. And I'm going to start with the top of his eyelid shape, which in this case is that sort of shape. It's quite flat across there, and then sort of dives down there. I can see quite a bit of the white of the eye on that side. On this side, it's the tiniest bit of the white of the eye, and mostly his tear ducts through there. So it's just making a few marks where I'm going to position the pupil and the iris. But that's really just in fact, that might even be angled down a bit more. And then once I'm there, I can draw this shape in. The bottom of his eyelid is actually sort of clips in that shape. So really, his pupil and the iris will be like that, but the top of his eyelid is going across there, and the bottom is sort of doing that. So So I'm not really seeing a perfect circle there. That's more like the shape I'm seeing. So it's really kind of just really focusing on the shapes now, just really looking to see what shapes I can see. I could then tone that in, maybe leave a little bit of light for the highlight, or I can bring the highlight out afterwards. So pupil and iris there. The bottom of his eyelid, so I can just come over here, I think it's a little bit like that. Going up to there. And that's all in quite a bit of shadow. I can use my blenders just to soften that out. It's quite a nice way of just softening that. From there, I'm looking at any other shadows, and there's quite a deep shadow just in here. It's got quite an unusual shaped nose. So that's all in shadow. And sort of down the side of his nose here. And then his eyebrows, really just going to try and draw a shape around them. I won't worry too much. It's almost like that kind of shape. Quite dark under here, a little bit light on the top. That's more or less what you see. There's quite a strong line there on his brow, sort of frown line. And then probably another one here. And a little bit of shadow just into here. It's worth having a look at how much space there is between his eyes. So I can measure that with my charcoal, maybe measure that eye and see how much space between them. Or I've got these dividers, these are quite useful. I'll make it a bit more accurate that way. And it's just over an eye's width, so whatever I've got here, if I just go just over an eye's width, that's about where I need to start the next eye. Okay, and then that's kind of coming back there. I've got my guideline to follow, that goes up, and then across here, something like that, let's go that way. Because I'm seeing a lot more of this side of the face, his eye appears wider here than it does here, because part of his eye is trying to go around the corner. So this eye will appear a bit wider. And I couldn't measure them to compare, but I know that that's the case, so I'm not going to worry too much there. Look at how much the white of the eye, much about there, and I can hardly see any of the white of the eye there, maybe a little bit there. So I'm looking at something a bit like that as a pupil and iris shape. That might be a bit too much, so I made that a bit wide. That's not too bad. And then that comes down like that. Eyebrow shape kind of comes up here and then over to here. And I can just see, where his eyebrow ends in relation to his eye. And from here, it's kind of going, got quite thick eyebrows, a bit like that. So I can almost like draw a shape around them and then just start to kind of shape that in. Like that, a little bit of shadow there. Soften that out a tiny bit there. I think sometimes when I've done this demo, I've drawn it out in pastel pencil and then we've got the tone in after. I actually think with the charcoal, it might be easier to lift some of the lift some of the tones out as you go, and sort of draw tonal values as well as shapes. He's got some nice bags under his eyes, some nice sort of sculptured shapes here, which is quite nice to, makes it quite interesting to draw. Little bits of shadow under there. Again, I can blend that either with my fingers or the blenders. And again, a bit more shadow here. So that really starts to sculpt the eye. You can see where the eye socket would be within that area. Looking at where his nostril would be, you can just see that that's roughly lined up with the corner of the eye. So that's going to come in about there. Sometimes it helps to just draw a little circle where you think the tip of the nose is. Our nose is obviously the same, they're made out of the same stuff as the rest of our face. The skin is skin, but it's just light and dark, it's protruding, so we get some highlights and some shadows. In this case, we've got shadow on the tip of the nose there, and a shadow just under his nostril here. And then that's just very, very slightly shadow, but nothing much. You just soften that out. And there's just a little bit of a shadow shape there. Sorry, this one was a little bit blunt. And then this kind of nice strong line here, soften that a bit. That may be a little bit. What you can do is sort of check things like the width of the eye and see how long the nose is that way. So once you've drawn something, I keep going back to that thing. I keep going back to the eye and just relating the other proportions to the eye. That may be a little bit short, the nose. I might need to lengthen that, but I won't change it now. But if I was making that a drawing, I might tweak that a bit. Once I'm there, I'll then have a look at how much space between the tip of the nose and the top lip. So obviously he's got a moustache, so normally you'd see a little shape a bit like that under the lips. So that's quite often worth drawing in. But in this case I can't really see that, so I'm just going to have to guess that's the middle of his lip. And then that will be where his top lip start, and then where his lips join is about there. And then his bottom lip, so he's got quite a deep top lip, but quite a narrow bottom lip. That will come to about there. Okay. Once I've got that position, I'll then try and find how the lips join, a line for how the lips join. His eyes are at a little bit of an angle, and his lips will be too. So again, it might be worth just drawing in a guideline where that's going to be. The other thing is the corner of the mouth, seeing where that lines up. You know, how far his lips come across, and it's roughly in line with maybe the middle of his eye, up to about there. Or you could also relate it to his nose, and there's a little bit of shadow on the side of his nostril there, and that's roughly where his lip comes out to on that side. On this side, yeah, it's more or less up to here actually, it's coming out quite a way. So once I've got those two marks in position, I can draw that line for how his lips meet, and that's going down the corner there. Start to get the shape for his lips, again lots of shadow in there, and quite often the shadows are deepest in the corners, a little bit more light in the middle of the lips. So that's going to be something like that, and I'll just soften that in the middle. And then a little bit of shadow on the bottom lip. And then under his lip, obviously he's got a beard, but there's quite often a little bit, you quite often find under your lip there'll be a little bit of shadow here. So that's worth looking out for. But in this case, it's really shadows on his beard we're looking at. There's a little bit of shadow here. His moustache is fairly light. Let's just make a few marks to try and suggest a shape of his moustache. Down to there. So that's like the main features of the head. So it's then sort of relating to his ear. So obviously I can't see any ear on that side. There is quite a nice strong shape under his eye there that's quite nice to get in. Maybe soften out. The side of his face and his ear, I mean from that I can see that the side of his temple kind of comes up here and round to here. I think his cheekbones out to here, so not particularly wide cheekbones, and that comes straight down to there. Because of the lighting, I can't really see where the shape of his jaw, but it sort of disappears into the shadow there. So I could get a load of shadow in here probably. His beard is standing out against the shadows in the background. It's got a little bit of shadow here, and I think his chin is going to end about there. Yeah, and again, I can maybe compare that depth with something to do with his eyes, and it's almost like from about there to there with the chin depth, and that's pretty much what I've got. So keep comparing back to where you started. That's what I find the way working. So you've got his beard shape in there, perhaps just draw a shape around that. We can work into that. Coming over this way, from here to here, quite often I find ears appearing about here. So it's a bit boring from here to here. We often don't realise how much space there is. But it's worth just kind of measuring that and just comparing, again, compare it back to where you started. It's about that much. So it comes out actually up to there, which is perhaps a bit more than we imagined. I might have exaggerated that a little bit further in, but there's quite a bit of space there often. Perhaps follow his hairline. So this is kind of coming up here. Got quite full, high, receding hairline. And then coming over here. And his hair's kind of coming up and something like that. So basically just trying to draw a shape around the hairline. But with his ear, we're trying to relate the ear to the eyes. So I think the top of the ear is about there. His earlobe is maybe roughly in line. Excuse me. Roughly in line with the bottom of his nose. So I think about there. So just make a few marks, a few positions to start with, and then you can work into that. I'm going to start it about there. That feels about right to me. So again, this is quite a tricky one, the ears, but it's a bit like the nose. It's just all flesh colour, skin colour, but lights and darks and shapes, and where the light catches one bit and other bits are thrown into shadow. So it's quite a good one for trying to see edges, where edges start and finish. A little bit of shadow in there. And then his ear will be something like that shape, a little bit of shadow underneath there. Then kind of going down into his collar, starts about there. He's got a little bit of a double chin, so there's a bit of shadow there, and then his chin's defined by his collar really, which I think is down to about there, and his neck across there. So if you're working on a portrait, that's how I kind of advise people to go about a portrait. So kind of working from the middle of the feet, get that across to start with, guidelines in to start with, get a rough idea when you want to work, and then get into the features, particularly the eyes and work out. So work from the most complicated bit. And that way you've got lots of room to manoeuvre then. I find quite often when people start off drawing portraits, they'll try and draw a head shape and then fit everything in. But it's really difficult then to get all these little distances to fit in a certain space is really hard. But if you just start with little distances and let the whole thing expand, take up the room it needs, you've got a lot better chance of getting closer to your source material. No questions? Any questions?
I noticed on things like Portrait Artist of the Year, they wouldn't be able to do what you were doing at all. They're sat there with their iPad, square, not looking at the socket at all, and just copying it square by square. I was very shocked at that. I mean, the skill you've got, none of them would be able to do that, I'm quite sure.
I mean, the thing was, I learned, I started doing portrait drawing from models at about age 16. That's when, if you wanted to take a photograph, you'd have to take 28 photographs and then take them to the chemist, and then you get them back 3 weeks later. So it was sort of drawing from observation. I mean, I did learn through going to classes where they work from models. Yeah, I mean, you can do the iPad and grid it all up. I don't mind a bit of gridding, but it does get really tedious after one. And I just think it's nice to be able to do it from direct observation, either direct observation of a picture or a model, really. So, but even if you're gridding it up, this is still a good way of doing it. Still, even if you then get your lines in and do it that way. It's more enjoyable, I think, this way. Okay.